I was speaking with a senior manager the other day who recently made a decision to leave the job that she had been working for about 6 to 8 months. Now, when I found out that she was leaving her job, I was curious to understand her motivation because she just recently joined the organization. And usually, when people leave their job, they say that they leave their boss, not the work. So I was curious to understand her motivation in this instance because from what I knew, she really enjoyed the work. And so when and she didn't have any issues with her leadership. Now, when I spoke to her and I asked her directly, were you having issues with your boss? Because they say that usually people, when they leave an organization, they leave their boss, not the work. She talked about how she really enjoyed the work. She felt like the work aligned with her skill set and that she didn't have any problems with the environment. But as we began to really unpack the conversation, I discovered that she was really in an environment where her creative spirit was restricted and she had to move into an environment that allowed her to be more free with her creativity. She became a little more comfortable and she talked to me about how she didn't feel like she had control over her day. She would come into the office and it was just meetings, 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 meetings. Now, I know for a lot of individuals in management, having meetings signifies that you're getting work done, you're holding people accountable, but sometimes managers overuse that tool and meetings become counterproductive. There was a study that said that meetings can cause up to 45 minutes of unproductive time because you have people who have to really adjust their mindset sometimes before and after a meeting. And when you're in flow and you have to stop for another meeting and another meeting and another meeting, it really prevents you from getting into that creative space and that creative zone in order to think more strategically. She continued on with her story talking about how not only did she feel like her time wasn't her own, but because of the culture of the organization, she didn't have the creative freedom to really chart the course that she wanted to chart for her organization because the higher level organization already had a lot of things mapped out. And so it was really her managing what they wanted versus her using her creative spirit to actually chart a new direction and a better direction based on what she was saying. Because sometimes when you have leaders that are too far removed from situations who force and enforce things down on the lower levels of the organization, it may not necessarily be the best move. And the people at the lower levels of the organization who are closer to the action and know what's going on, they have these creative ideas, but they're sometimes restricted because people who aren't even in touch with the front line have already made up their mind. And in many instances, depending on the culture of your organization, there's nothing that you can really do. And so that started her on her path to finding a space and an environment that was conducive to where she was in life and where she is in life. Number one, wanting the space and the freedom to be more creative. And number two, wanting, outside of just the time, just having the authority to be more creative. And so, how do you become more creative in yourself and in your organization? Creativity is sometimes this, obscure concept that some people don't feel like they have within them. I'm not creative. I can't draw. I can't sing. I wish that I could sing. I love to sing. People think that those kinds of things mean that you're creative. But creativity is so much more than that. Creativity is in the way you speak. Creativity is in the way you think. Creativity is in the way you get things done. It's not just about being able to do something quote unquote artistic. And so one of the first things we have to do is reshape our understanding of creativity. It's that thing that taps into your heart. It's that thing that thing that taps into your emotion and your heart in such a way that causes you to express your authentic self. Having children is a form of creation. It's not just about being able to put colors together. The way you dress, though, is a form of creation. And we all have this creative bone within us. And some of us just don't know how to find it. So how do you become more creative? There is a story out about Google. Google has a policy, had a policy that they implemented, which actually allowed their workers to spend 20% of their time really just digging in and being creative and having side projects. That's how we had innovations, and we got innovations like Gmail. And it started with the policy. And so that there were two things there. There were actually two things. There was a policy which created space and created time for the employees to do something that the organization thought was valuable. But again, when we get so entrenched in just getting it done, we think that productivity is all about simply just making sure milestones are met. But a lot of times it's about creating the space for people to rise to the highest levels that they can rise to. And that may involve giving them time to be more creative. And so Google implemented a policy that created 20% more time for their employees to be creative. So they had a strategic objective that they could really tie to it. And so in that, I'll say there are a few things. Number one, when you look at policies, policies shape our cultures within organizations. They guide behaviors within our organizations, whether it's financial policy, whether it's human capital policy, IT policy. If you say you're about fun and your policies are far from fun, or if you say you're about freedom, but your policies are restrictive, then there is a misalignment in who you say you are as an organization and the policies. And so as individuals, when we're seeking out organizations, number one, we have to understand if you want to become more creative, you have to put yourself in an environment to be more creative. And you have to make sure that the environment creates the space, the time for you to be more creative. And so instead of just looking at organizations to say, I want to go work there because I can make a lot of money. Yes, money is important. But at some point in your career, you're going to get to a point where you ask yourself, does this organization align with my values? Does this organization align with my value? If I value alone time, does this organization really exemplify and value those things? Right? And so you want to be more creative. Number one, again, make sure you're in the right environment. And if you are in the right environment, if you're in an environment of creativity, and again, this is for personal and for professional, because we have choice. That's the beauty of our humanity, that we have choice, right? And so if we're in an environment that is conducive for our creativity, whether it's taking a stroll outside, not just sitting in the house, going to the coffee shop, going to the library, going to your favorite museum, putting yourself in that environment to be creative, and then blocking out the time. You see, we need time in order to allow our mind to get into that creative flow. We've become too obsessed with multitasking. Oh, I have to check the email and look at Instagram and check my phone and be on YouTube and do all of these different things and run on TikTok and call my mom. We need to block all of the things that will prevent us from being creative out. Find the time. There is time. There's enough time. I don't accept that. People always come to me when I coach them and they say, oh, I don't have the time. When we sit down and we look at their time and they have the time. You just don't have the motivation. If I told you that you were going to die in a month if you did not make the time for your creativity, you would find the time. But we don't have that sense of urgency. And so finding the time and creating that space, I don't care if it's 30 minutes, I don't care if it's 10 minutes, find some time to sit with yourself so that you can tap into that creative spirit and you can meditate on whatever it is or think about whatever term you want to use. Meditate, pray, think. Put yourself in the mental and emotional state so that you can receive creativity. And once you've put yourself in the mental state so that you can receive creativity, things will start to flow. One of my most creative moments is when I'm exercising, when I'm running, actually. Not necessarily lifting hard weights, but when I'm running. When I'm running, it's just me, nature. I love to run outside. It's just me and nature, and there's a flow. And then all of these thoughts and all of this creativity just comes from nowhere. And when I get back from my run, I'm able to jot those things down. But we have to set aside the time. So, number one, putting yourself in the environment or the culture that actually is conducive for creativity. And number two, mapping out or marking out time for you specifically to be creative. And then the last thing I'll say is we often get scared to engage with one another. Creativity doesn't have to occur in a vacuum. The best creativity comes when you're going back and forth and brainstorming ideas and just hallucinating about possibilities with other people. That's when you leverage your teams. That's when you leverage your friends and your families. Those are the people who you can bounce ideas off in some instances to get your creative juices flowing. And for those of us who may not necessarily like to share all of our ideas with other people, guess what? There is a wonderful ideation tool called ChatGPT. There's one called Gemini. There are so many different ideation tools. Copilot. Make them your assistant. Make them your partner in creativity. We have to get comfortable with artificial intelligence because that is the new wave. And artificial intelligence helps to accelerate your creativity. But we think that artificial intelligence is going to just replace us completely. No, human creativity, the way we think, the way we act, our emotions are unique to us. And so when you start to interact with artificial intelligence and train it to think more uniquely like you, you're accelerating it through your lens of creativity. So there's still an opportunity for you through AI or through artificial intelligence to expand your personal creativity. Don't be afraid of it. Lean into it. Learn how to interact with it. Use that in conjunction with the people that are beside you. And I guarantee you'll start to develop your creativity. Now, it's a muscle that needs to be developed. You know, the creativity is a skill. It's a skill like any other skill. And I have seen individuals that need to develop that creative muscle a little more in order to get to where they want to be, but they don't necessarily know how. And this is the best way this is the most simplest way that I know how. Without going on and on and on. This is a very simple way. Number one, environment. Number two, create time. Number three, leverage other people and artificial intelligence in order to accelerate your creativity and learn from what you have discovered from all of these things. We can learn from all of these things from your environment, right? If you sit in your environment and you look around your environment, really take in your environment, there's creation all around us that can inspire us. Think about how your environment inspires your idea. Think about what you can do in your environment to introduce more inspiration into your life through your senses. In your time, what have you learned from your time with yourself? What have you learned about yourself? What have you learned about what you value? And how does that guide your creativity? And then last, from your interaction with people, who are the people that give you the greatest energy and that give you the greatest levels of creativity? Those are the people you want to keep interacting with so that you can continue to develop your creativity. And with that, I hope this was very helpful, and I hope you all use this information to be even more creative.